Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 82. And we have an awesome show planned for you today with the one, the only, arguably the best point fighter on the planet right now, Elijah Everill, hailing from Great Britain. He just claimed another WAKO World Championship. He's won the Irish Open openweight. He's won the US Open openweight. He's won all over the world. One of the most decorated fighters in the game, no question. So Elijah, it is an honor to have you on the show, man. And let's just start for our Black Belt Magazine audience. Introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh, thank you very much, mate. That was a great introduction, so I really appreciate it. So my name's Elijah Everill, and I'm 23 years old. I'm from England. And I'm actually from Telford, which is a small town in the Midlands in England. I started martial arts when I was 4 years old, almost 5 years old. So I've been at it for a long time. And this is my passion. This is what I absolutely love to do. And I've had a pretty decent career so far that I'm looking forward to continuing on.
That's awesome. And you mentioned your passion, Elijah. That's one thing that I love about watching you is that you gained a fan in me instantly when you won the Irish Open, not because you just won the open weight. Obviously, that's a big deal. But the reaction you had after winning the open weight, it showed how much you cared. It showed how much you love the sport. And sportmartialarts.com has a great picture of it they took. I think it was a profile picture or something like that for a little while, right? So that's one thing that I love about watching you fight is that passion is evident. And let's start with what's happened most recently, right? You just won another WAKO World Championship. And for those of you tuning in that aren't familiar with WAKO, that's the World Association of Kickboxing Organizations. Has a lot of the best point fighting talent on the planet for sure. And it's where predominantly all the great European competitors compete. The World Championships was in Italy. They have the Irish Open every year, Hungarian Kickboxing World Cup, so on and so forth. So a lot of European events, but it's a worldwide league. So Elijah, tell us about winning that WAKO World title and specifically this one. I know you've won them before, right? But what made this one different?
I think what made this one different, Jackson, is that we had 2 years out of competition. And, I was honestly, when COVID hit, I was devastated. We just spoke about the Irish Open Grand Champion. That was the last time that I fought, was the Irish Open. But before the Hungarian World Cup this year, that was the last time that I fought. So I went 18 months without competing. And for somebody like me who's used to competing pretty much every other weekend, that's an awful long time. So to be able to get back out there and represent my national team at the World Championships last week, it was like a relief. It was, finally getting back to some kind of normality. And it just felt like I was back to being myself again. I was out there and doing my thing and just enjoying myself. And I'm happy to say that I came away with the gold medal, which I'm obviously over the moon with. It was a special one because of that. I mean, it was almost 2 years out of the game. So it's great to come back with a gold medal as well.
For sure. And that is a really long time to be out of the game. As sport karate competitors, whether it's forms and weapons or fighting, we very typically compete every other week, at least once a month, right? So to have that long of a layoff, we talk a lot about ring rust, right? Weapons competitors drop more often, forms competitors stumble, fighters either look slow or they can't get their timing or they can't get their distance right away. Did you feel any of that? Did you feel like maybe in Hungary, was there any ring rust, or did you feel like you stepped back in there and it was back to normal?
The Hungarian World Cup, there was definitely some ring rust. It was actually, I was lucky because I actually fought in the team fights first. And I didn't fight my individual. So it was like, I wanted to fight teams, especially at that event, because I wanted like a little bit of a warm up before I got into my main divisions on the Saturday, and obviously the open weight, the most important one, which was on the Sunday. So I'm very glad that I got the chance to fight on the Friday, just to get, to dip my feet in again. So there's definitely some ring rust in that one. I definitely didn't perform the greatest in the team fights, but after that one, I definitely pretty much got straight back into what I was used to doing, and I fought my way after. I kind of just got into my rhythm after my second fight, and I got better and better throughout the tournament and started progressing, and my performances were getting better and better. So yeah, I was lucky enough to have that little team fight just before the Hungarian World Cup. I mean, you can do as much sparring or as much training as you want in the gym, but there's no substitute for actually getting out there and competing, you know. So thankfully I had that Friday evening team fight just to get the rust off. And yeah, then I started on Saturday very well and continued that on for the rest of the competition as well. So.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree that when you have a chance to get in there and get your feet wet a little bit, like for me as a weapons guy, I always liked whenever there was a night show and we didn't have a chance to get up on the stage beforehand and see the lights, I always liked having synchronized weapons when I could go up there for a division that it mattered, but it wasn't as important as the individual divisions, right? You go up there and kind of get a feel for it and get back into it. But definitely coming off of such a long layoff, that must have been super important. And then another thing we talked about, I had Enrique Latona on the show last week, and he mentioned that like when he goes out there for like a WAKO world title, he's nervous, right? And different competitors have a different way about this, right? So Enrique admitted that he gets nervous about it. A lot of competitors get nervous, right? I've heard stories where like Raymond Daniels, when he would fight, would get nervous, right?
Oh yeah.
Then there's also competitors who just kind of push that to the side. Like I'm somebody who's always kind of just brushed any of that off and just tried to stay as relaxed as possible. I've heard fighters like that before too. So what is it for you? Do you feel nerves? Do you feel anxious when you go out there, or is it different?
For me personally, I've always been brought up with competition. I'm sure, like yourself, Jackson, we both competed from a very early age. And when I was competing, the first thing that my dad actually taught me about competition was how to deal with nerves, because obviously kids struggle with this a lot. You know, it's one of the biggest things for kids is overcoming those nerves. And he taught me all about how adrenaline works. And I understood this from when I was a child, you know, and not many kids do understand what adrenaline is. And it's actually there to help fuel and enhance your performance if you use it correctly. So I actually, like, I don't feel confident in myself if I don't feel that feeling. Does that make sense? Like if I'm not that bothered, I'm like a little bit laid back, then I know there's something wrong, because I'm not getting that extra fuel, that extra little bit that's going to push me through to make a great performance. So when I get that feeling, it's like, oh yes, come on, let's go. And then I ask for more. I like clench my fists. I take a deep breath and I ask for more. I ask my body to fuel me with more, because I know it's going to make me that little bit faster, that little bit sharper. And that usually helps me get the performances that I need to win. So yeah, I look at it that way, as like not a negative thing. Obviously I do feel it, but I look at it as a positive thing. When that feeling is there, it's a positive feeling. It's not a negative feeling, which I think people get confused with when they use the word nerves. You know, they look at it as a negative rather than actually, no, this is going to help benefit my performance, and it's a positive.
Right. I love that way of putting it, because I feel the exact same thing, right? A lot of times in American tournaments, when people see me go up on stage, I'll like walk up the side of the ring and like do like a little ki. That's exactly what you were talking about closing your eyes, taking the deep breath, trying to channel that adrenaline, right?
Yes, exactly.
So any young competitors watching this, that's what you want to try to latch onto, because the most common, this is probably common for you too, because I know you coach as well. Most common question I get as a coach is, how do you not be nervous, right? And if you can learn to channel that adrenaline, that's going to make a huge difference in your ability to stay calm when you go out there. And you've had to do that time and time again. As I mentioned in the introduction, Irish Open open weight, the most coveted title in all of point fighting. US Open, proving that you can come to America, do it as well. Multiple WAKO World Championships, different age groups, all that, right? So compare those. What is it like? What are the differences between being in the Irish Open open weight final, being on the US Open stage on TV, on ESPN? Just take us through, maybe just focus on those three, compare them. What are the differences? What feels the same?
Well, I try my best to treat it like any other fight. You know, I try not to think too much into, oh wow, this is the Irish Open finals, or this is the US Open finals, or this is a WAKO World Championship final. I just try and treat every fight like it's the same. And I think the key to my success in these big moments is I really break it down into simple terms, Jackson. Like, I don't even think of the fight as a full fight. I think of scoring points. And I think of like fighting to 1 point. And I know that if I win 1 point, if I win a fight to 1 point more times than my opponent does, I'm going to get the win. So I break it down into really, really small moments within the fight, and I try and control those moments. And I know that if I can do that, then at the end of the fight, I'm gonna have more points than my opponent. So that's the way that I kind of break it down. I don't think of the fight as like some big, long, like a big spectacle or anything like that. I just think, okay, I've got to beat this guy to 1 point, and I've got to do it, I don't know, 20 times. And I know that if I do that within the duration of the fight, I'm going to come away with more points and I'm going to win. So that's something that actually helps me to do that and keep focused on the job. But of course, it's difficult. It's difficult to block out everything else and, to block out the pressure. But I think I'm one of those people that thrive on the pressure as well. Like I love those big moments. This is what I do this for. I want to be center stage. I want to be in the Irish Open finals. I want to be on ESPN and fighting in the US Open finals. This is what I love to do. It's what I dreamed of when I was a kid. So, for me, it's like an enjoyment thing. It's not like we just spoke about then. It's not me being nervous. This is what I prepare my whole life for, and I fully expect to be there as well. Like when I go to the tournaments, I expect to be there in the end. And I just look at it like it's another fight, another day, and go out there and do my job.
And that is the mentality of a champion, right? All great competitors put all outside distractions aside, and all that matters is the business that's put in front of them. And you reflect that in your fighting style, right? Some fighters are very flashy and showboaty. You're not. You get the job done. You're effective. You're incredibly efficient, which is what's helped you to become one of the best fighters in the world. That's what impresses me most. I remember, shout out to Martial Arts Center Network and Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I was listening to the interview that you did with them, and they were Alex was talking about like your low stance and all that, and how impressive that is to him. Obviously, your blitz is lightning fast, but to me, it's your efficiency. Every movement you make has purpose. And point fighting, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but I feel like we see a lot of wasted movement, even amongst great fighters, right? Yeah. You're extremely efficient with your movement. I think that's what makes you effective. We're going to get into the art of point fighting more, and especially the differences between the leagues, NASCA, WAKO, so on and so forth. But I did have one more question about, those different titles, particularly the WAKO World Championship or Irish Open versus the US Open, and the stage factor. So ignoring the actual fight itself, which we're going to get into later. But how different is it in those big moments being actually elevated up on a stage in America, whereas in Europe, I don't think I've ever seen a fight happen on a stage over in Europe, right? So is that something that you even think about, or do you just kind of ignore it?
We do have, I think Irish Open sometimes has, if you go on the night show, they sometimes raise a level.
That's right, for the division.
I think that's probably the only time where we have like stages. And Point Fighting Cup is another one that does that as well. So Point Fighting Cup is also on a stage. So I wouldn't say that I'm as used to it as the American fighters, because you guys do it all the time, but I'm pretty used to it, and I don't let it affect my performance. I actually prefer fighting on the stage. I'm not really sure why, but I like fighting on the stage. I think it just gives me a feel of like, if I'm on a stage, I'm in a big fight or I'm in a final or something like that, and it's important. So I actually enjoy it up there, and I wouldn't say it affects my performance at all. That probably makes me even better. I love being on the stages. So.
Right. And that's one thing that I think in order for sport karate to continue to grow, we've got to continue to make it more of a made-for-TV sport, right?
Absolutely.
So for me, I've always thought it was weird that the Irish Open final, this huge deal, is the open weight in just a ring. It's surrounded by people and the atmosphere is electric and it's exciting, but it's exciting for people that love point fighting, right? I feel like if you put that up on a stage, it makes it more of a spectacle for somebody that's never seen point fighting before, or kickboxing before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a little difference that I found interesting. So before we dive into more of the nuances and strategy and rule sets and things of that nature, let's go all the way back first. How did this journey start for you? You said you started when you were young. Your dad got you into it. One thing in particular that I'm curious about is if you started as a traditional martial artist, was it a martial arts program? Or I know a lot of the point fighters come from more of a kickboxing background, obviously still martial arts, but kickboxing is different from a traditional with belt range and all that, right? So what was coming up like for you?
So I started martial arts when I was 4 going on 5, like I said previously, and it was a leaflet came through the door. It was, a random one. The leaflet came through the door advertising Lee Matthews Black Belt Academy at the time. And it was actually my dad who didn't want me to go. My dad didn't want me to have anything to do with martial arts or combat or anything like that. He's very protective over me and didn't really want me to get hurt or be in fights and things like that, so it was my mom who was the one who was like pushing it, and I was obsessed with Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles, as most kids are at that age. And I was trying to do all these cool moves around the living room, and my mom was like, oh, we need to take him. So they ended up agreeing to take me to class, and the program that we have for like 4 to 6 year olds was called our Little Ninjas program. And I joined up with the Little Ninjas program, and it's like fun martial arts games and building motor skills and things like that. And honestly, I had an absolute blast. Loved it and just never looked back. And then, but the program is like pretty much based around, it's traditional martial arts, but it's like, it is a real mix. Obviously at that age, it's difficult to teach a traditional style. So they kind of just focus on building motor skills and helping them with the fundamentals, basically. And then when I started to go up levels a little bit and I was getting older, it kind of was more fine tuned towards the WAKO style of fighting, because Lee Matthews, who was my instructor, was also a fighter before, and he fought in all the big WAKO events. So it was kind of our like grading syllabus was geared towards more sparring than anything. We did some traditional stuff as a big mix. I mean, there was some katas in there, there's some boxing in there, there's some the kickboxing in there, there's point fighting in there, there's grappling in there. It's like a big mix of things. So when you achieve a black belt, it's like you have a pretty good knowledge all around. So yeah, that's how I got started. And then when I was about 7 or 8, I started doing my first competitions, and I was going everywhere, just trying to get as much experience as I could. Any league, any organization, I was going everywhere around the UK. And then I think I must have been about 10 the first time I went to Irish Open. That was the first time when I really, opened my eyes, and I was like, wow, look at some of these fighters. Like, it was the first time I saw Ray, for example, and Jack and Robbie. And that's when they were like really, they were young, but they were killers. They were fast, right. Yeah. So, and then I was going there every year. And then I went to my first WAKO Worlds when I was probably, I think 11 or 12, something like that. And then I got into doing that. And the first time I went to WAKO Worlds, I was like, okay, this is really where I need to be. If I'm going to get better, I need to be competing in WAKO all the time. I need to be going to these big international events, and doing all the tournaments that are on the WAKO calendar throughout the year. And that's when I really started to do that. I also had some success in boxing as well, because I was boxing when I was younger also. So I wasn't just doing WAKO stuff. I was also doing the boxing at the same time, because I wanted to do boxing to help with my light contact. So I'm one of those fighters that is an all-rounder. I do point fighting, but I also do continuous. I also do kick light, so I've done full contact before. So I was also doing boxing at the time. And then the way things were going with WAKO and with how busy I was and doing all of these tournaments, I ended up just sticking with kickboxing. And then pretty much since then, I've been doing the same thing, traveling around, doing all the competitions, and trying to win them all.
That's awesome. That explains why your hands are so fast if you were that heavily into boxing, right?
Yeah, and that's still to this day as well. Like I still box now. It's one of those things that I absolutely love to do. I really love to box, and it's definitely helped me with my continuous sparring. And also, I think it's great for any point fighter to be able to actually throw hands and actually be able to fight as well. It definitely helps you if you've got that little bit of a background in either like a full contact discipline or boxing. I think is a great tool to use.
For sure. And I think that any martial artist can appreciate just having a well-rounded approach, right? A true martial artist doesn't just become a black belt in one style and only ever knows that one way. We're always students, right? So we're constantly trying to learn from other styles, and whether it's to improve our competitive prowess or just to improve as athletes and improve as martial artists.
Yeah.
That's an essential part of being martial artist, is always being a student. I picked up on something interesting there. So you said when you started, your dad really wasn't about it. Your mom is who was more supportive of it, right? But then you also mentioned earlier that your dad taught you a lot about kind of channeling the adrenaline and those emotions. So at what point did you win him over? Where did he start to be like, okay, yeah, let's do this martial arts thing?
Straight away. Straight away. So you know, in the first few classes, he absolutely loved taking me and loved watching me. I think it was just the thought of it for him, of me doing something that was like looked at as aggressive, you know, and he didn't really want me to have anything to do with that. But when we did the first class and he saw how much fun I was having, how much how much fun all the other kids were having and how much they were learning, he absolutely loved it. And then ever since then, like, he's just been my biggest supporter, and honestly so thankful to have him. Even, you know, even now, even though I'm older and I'm grown up, he's still my number one fan and does absolutely everything he can to support me on the journey. So, you know, without my dad, I would not be here. And I love him, and I really thank him for everything that he's done for me.
That's awesome. Such a special message. And, you know, it's one thing that I feel like is so common among many champions of our sport, is behind most champions, not all, there's exceptions, but behind most champions, there's a very strong support system with their parents that are, you know, motivating them and supporting them and pushing them. So it's really special to see
I'm
that.
honestly blessed to have the two best parents in the world for me. They've been amazing. Honestly, my mom and my dad both sacrificed so much for me to do well in this sport, and just can't thank them enough. So I'm sure they'll be watching this, and yeah, they're amazing, honestly. And I think, like you said, obviously there is exceptions, but if you have that support system, you have people that have got your back and fully supporting you and pushing you towards greatness, then, you know, you're onto a winner there. If you've got people behind you like that, you know, I know a lot of kids struggle with that. I'm just blessed and grateful that I have two amazing parents.
That's awesome. And so we talk about you growing up in the martial arts, but now let's talk about what the tournament scene was like in Great Britain. So tell us a little bit about sport karate culture there. I know there's multiple schools that teach it. Obviously, your school that you now operate. There's other schools. There's a lot of forms and weapons competitors that come from Great Britain to Irish Open as well. So tell us a bit about what it's like there. Are there many regional tournaments? Do you kind of have to leave the country to get to a lot of the events? What's the culture like?
There is so many tournaments, Jackson. It's unreal. I mean, if you wanted to, you could compete every weekend in the UK. Obviously, normal times, not COVID times, but you could compete pretty much every weekend in one way or another. You know, whether it's a WAKO event or whether it's an ISCA event or a WKA event or whatever. There is events everywhere. There's so many different entities and organizations that are running competitions. So if you really wanted to fight every weekend, you probably could find somewhere to fight. So, you know, there's plenty of competitions over here. WAKO is definitely the strongest over here, and definitely the biggest as well. And I think a lot of the time now, people from GB are going to the European tournaments to try and get that like high level fighting in, purely to go, because they know they're the people that they're going to be competing against in the World Championships or the European Championships. So even though there is a great tournament circuit here and we have some really high level fighters, you see a lot of us traveling out because they want to get that experience in of traveling abroad and competing at the highest level against the same people that they're going to be against in the Worlds or Europeans. But that's, you know, there's still plenty of good events here. And yeah, you're definitely not going to struggle to find competitions on the weekend, put it that way.
That's awesome. And that's a common denominator that I found amongst a lot of countries that produce great sport karate talent is a solid infrastructure of regional events, right?
Yeah,
tournaments
absolutely.
within that country. That's typically what kind of breeds those competitors, because they find sport karate, they fall in love with it. The more they compete, the better they get.
Yeah.
Top level.
I suppose it's easier for us here than you guys as well, because we're, you know, our country's a lot smaller than the USA. So for us to travel to different cities, and it's not that difficult. You know, I live in the center of England, in the Midlands, and the most I'm going to travel really is like 4 or 5 hours, and that's far. That's like that, either really down south or up north. But that's about as far as it goes. But I know for you guys to travel, it's a lot harder because you've got such a big country. So I think we're blessed in that sense that we're a small country. It's not that difficult to get around, and there is plenty of tournaments.
Right. Well, I think where there is a parallelism there is regionally in the United States, right?
Right.
So we have different leagues that operate in the northeastern United States, the southeastern, with no connections between them, right? They're just independent league here, independent league there. So I would say for us, it's like if you're competing within your regional league, that would be the equivalent of you guys competing within England. But then you guys go over to Hungary, or you go over to Italy, or like Ireland. That's the equivalent of like if I go over to California for a tournament, right? So
I got you.
It's kind of the same thing.
I got you. Yeah.
So speaking of California, you've actually traveled there multiple times and trained with Raymond Daniels. You've been mentored by Raymond for a long time, obviously a member of the All-Stars for the past several years now. So how did that relationship start? You know, it's not always easy to, you know, become a protege of arguably the greatest point fighter of all time, right? So how did that start?
So that started when the first time I went to Irish Open, actually, when I saw him fight. The first time I ever saw Raymond fight was against Lee, my instructor, which is crazy. So they were fighting in, it might have been open weight, or it might have been division, I can't remember. But that was the first time. And I remember that before we got on the plane to Irish Open, me and Lee and my parents were all on the same flight. And I remember Lee saying, "Oh, Raymond Daniels comes to this tournament. Make sure you watch him. Make sure you watch him." And I was like, okay. And then I obviously thought the guy was going to be good, but I didn't think he was going to be that good. And then I saw him fight Lee, and he like hit him with like a jump spinning head kick. It's just crazy, you know. So, and then obviously after that, I wanted to go and take a picture with him. So I had my picture with him, and Ray's amazing with the kids. He's always making a big fuss of them, and you know, great with his fans, and always making time to take pictures and things like that. So I was lucky enough, and he was chatting with me a little bit. And then the following years, like he came over to England, he was doing seminars everywhere. So obviously I attended his seminars, went there, and over the years, we just started building a good relationship. Like he was seeing me everywhere, you know, either Irish Open or this seminar or that seminar. And he remembered me from watching me, and he thought I had some good skills. And then it got to the point where I was getting a little bit older, and I must have been in my teenage years, and I was on top 10 UK back then. And I remember we fought against the All-Stars, and I had a really good performance in the team fights. And you know, Ray was keeping an eye on it, obviously, and he saw how well I was doing and how well I was progressing as I was getting older. And I remember I was walking back one of the days from the little walk from the City West Arena to the hotel. Well, I was walking back that way with my dad, and then we saw Ray and Jack were walking the opposite direction. So we ended up like crossing paths, and then Ray just like called me over to the side, and he was like, "Look, I would really love to have you as part of the team, and we think we've got a great relationship with you and your dad, and I think I can help take you to the next level. Would you be interested in coming on the team with us?" And of course, you don't say no to Raymond Daniels, right? You don't say no to the All-Stars. So, you know, I jumped on. I was ecstatic, honestly, and and then that was it from there. So it's been a great journey, and very thankful to have him as a mentor.
That's awesome. And that's a perfect segue to talk about the All-Stars, right? Because being on that team, they're on the Mount Rushmore of the most iconic point fighting teams of all time, right?
Yeah.
You talk about Paul Mitchell, you talk about the old school American team, the Metro All-Stars. The All-Stars are in that conversation, Karali in Hungary, right? So these great iconic point fighting franchises. All-Stars is one of them. And All-Stars in particular, I feel like, to the outside world, me being a Paul Mitchell guy, is more of a black box, right? Like people don't know what goes on as well within the All-Stars, because I feel like of those teams that I just listed, they've probably had the least members, right? Paul Mitchell's been around for 35 years. We've had over 100 members in that time span. And so members have come and gone and retired and talked about their experiences. But All-Stars has kind of always been, that core, like Ray, Jack, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
obviously adding legends along the way, Trevor Nash, and then now yourself. So just tell us a little bit about that experience being on a team of that caliber, especially a team that a lot of people don't know the inner workings of.
Yeah. So I mean, it's amazing because it's a dream for me. You know, it's when I first went to the Irish Open, it was those guys who really inspired me to like do this to the best of my abilities, you know. So I loved it as a kid, but then Raymond and the All Stars, they opened my eyes, and yeah, when they asked me to be a part of the team, I was absolutely buzzing. And yeah, to be on a team with them is awesome. Yeah, like the saying goes, you know, if you want to be a lion, you have to surround yourself with lions, and that's exactly what they are. They all have such a great mentality. I think that's probably the biggest thing that separates them from other teams, is they really have that mentality that they go there to win, and there is nothing else than winning. And that's the sort of person that I am as well. So it goes, we go very well together, me and the guys. You know, when we turn up to a competition, we expect to win teams, we expect to be in the finals of open weight with each other, you know. So that's just the sort of culture that they breed within the all-star group. And I think if you're going to be a top champion, then that's the sort of attitude that you got to have. So it's definitely rubbed off on me. Obviously, those guys have got a wealth of experience, a lot more experience than I do. So it's great for me to be the young guy learning from these top champions and legends that we've had, like Ray and Jack and Trevor and Robbie. And, you know, so I'm just soaking it all in like a sponge as much as I can.
For sure. And when you're on a team with so much talent, and not just talent, but so many legends, right? There's got to be some great moments that happen. Like my favorite team fight of all time was Corrali and All Stars at Irish Open. I forget what year it was.
Me too.
Exactly, right? Like that fight was, and I was pulling for Corrali because they're my teammates, right, on provincial. Right. But anyway, but then like the comeback that Jack wound up finishing off in that last round, and Jack showing emotion that Jack never shows, right? Like that was such a So since you've been on the team, are there any like cool All-Stars moments that you've experienced that you want to share?
Well, I had the pleasure of going to California with to train there. Like you spoke of earlier, I actually went out there for 8 weeks, and I had the time of my life out there. It was Ray invited me to go and stay at his house, so I lived with him for 8 weeks. And Jack obviously lives in California as well. Robbie was living in California at that time, so he had moved from Canada to California, and he was living there as well with Ray. So I went out there for 8 weeks, and I had the time of my life. I can't really put my finger on like a specific moment, because we've had a lot of good times, a lot of good moments, but that trip in general was just was an awesome experience. And yeah, hopefully, I mean, I haven't had a chance to go back yet because of COVID restrictions and everything, but I'm definitely going to get out there again and get some more training in. I think going there and training with those guys, like it changed me almost. It evolved me as a fighter. Like I came back and I felt like I had improved, you know. So, and when you reach the top level, I mean, you know yourself, Jackson, like it's a 0.01%, you know. And I came back feeling like I'd achieved that, like I'd got that little bit better, that little bit of a push that I needed in the right direction. And you know, that's made a big difference over the last couple of years, and is one of the reasons why I've been on like a roll for the last 2 years or so. So it was an awesome trip, and I'm sure we're gonna have many other good times as well.
That's awesome. And it's easy to see how transformative that was. I mean, it is pretty much right after that trip that you had, that's when you kind of started this tear and won everything that there is to win. And then obviously experiencing a pandemic, coming back and then winning like it's still no problem, right? Talk about your evolution as a fighter. Now let's talk about evolving when you go from one league to the other, right? So I know it's obviously been a little while because of COVID, but when you go from fighting your entire life in WAKO, that rule set, fighting that style, when you do come over to the United States, how much do you feel that you have to change your style? Because your best weapon, your blitz, a blitz is still a blitz. It's still going to score, right? So do you change your strategy at all, or are there nuances?
You definitely have to change your strategy 100%. You know, it's the same for me going there as the American guys coming over here as well. You've got to be able to adapt, and I think every top champion, has the ability to do that and adapt to it, to any rule set. So obviously, going to the States, we know that you have the 2-point body kick rule, so obviously that encourages more kicks. So I think it's definitely a good idea to throw more legs when you're over in the States. We also have to adapt with I think there's a slightly smaller area over in the States as well. So I think it's a 6x6 that you guys fight on, and we fight on a 7x7. So again, slightly smaller, which leaves a little bit less room for movement. And obviously no front hand to the body either. So that's another thing, like front hand to the body, obviously 2-point body kicks. And I think, you know, out of all of them, the biggest change, the biggest adaptation is the 1-2 minute round. I think it's a tricky one, because a lot of I think it totally changes the pace of the fight. It totally changes when you fight in Europe. When we know we have 2 rounds, it's almost like, I don't want to say it slows down, because we definitely don't slow down, but I feel like it's more strategic and there's more game planning. There's more room for game planning. Whereas in America, it's all just like go, go, go. And you've got 2 minutes to get your points quick, and you got to kick, and you got to blitz, and you got to move. And there's not a lot of time to think about what you're doing. It's just attack, you know? So I think there's definitely more strategy over here in Europe, but then over in the States, I think you got to be explosive, and you got to be able to make decisions very, very quickly. And if you don't make the right decision, then it's costly, because, you know, you might end up like trying to step in on somebody's leg and you get it wrong, you get the timing wrong, that's 2 points the other way, you know, and then suddenly you're down. So it totally changes the fight there. So I wouldn't say like it's just one rule that changes it, but the fact that they're all together, the 2-point body kick, no front hand to the body, and 1-2 minute round, you put that all together, suddenly everything starts to change. But like I said, you know, the top fighters will always adapt, and they'll always find a way to win.
And the pace of the fight, to me, is the most notable difference. It's those 2 compounded things, right? You've got less time, so people are more go, 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 just the 1 round, 2 minutes. And then also the smaller ring. And so when you're in that smaller ring, this is something I've talked about with regard to Virtual Fight Tour, being inside the cage, right?
Yeah.
But the same thing goes for a NASCA 6x6 compared to a WAKO 7x7. When you are starting in a closer proximity to the other fighter, at some point you don't have a choice but to go. There's going to be more contact because there's less room to maneuver. So I think that that's interesting. So one of the probably, I mean, he's the greatest fighter of all time by most people's opinion, but part of what helped that was the fact that he has the most Irish Open weight titles of anybody ever, and won everything there is to win on NASCA, the most Diamond Nationals titles between super fights and the Diamond Ring of anybody ever, multiple US Opens. It would take hours to go through Raymond Daniels' whole resume, right? So in his mentorship of you, was there any secret that he gave about, like, when you're going from Europe and fighting in America, like a key strategic difference, or maybe even outside of that? What's your best, like, Raymond Daniels bit of wisdom?
He actually really gave me some great technical advice on how to close the space on people. And me and Ray have like similar frames because we're both long and we're both tall. So he actually gave me some great insight how to close the distance better, and not leave any room for defensive side kicks, which is another thing. Like he knows what my strengths are with my blitz, and he taught me a few ways of how to make that better effective. So that was something that was a really good technical detail that we worked a lot on it in California. Also, he taught me how to throw the spinning back kick on somebody's leg, which I've used quite a few times now. So if anybody, if I'm ever fighting a left leg kicker, because I'm a left leg, is one of the things that I look for now, especially because me and Ray worked on this when I was in California, is like that spinning back kick on the front leg, which works really, really good. So I'd say they're probably the 2 best things technically that he taught me, was how to close the space to better execute my blitz, and also that spinning back kick on the leg. He does something crazy. It seems simple, but it's quite difficult. It's difficult to coordinate your body to do it. So it took some practice, but I've got it nailed now. I'm always looking for it when somebody's kicking at me with the left leg. So that was definitely a important details that he gave me technically. But I think the biggest way that he affected me was like mentally as well. The thing is that he gave me such confidence in myself because of how much he was believing in me. You know, his little conversations that we had that we spoke about, and how much belief he has in my abilities. So it almost made me believe in myself even more as well, hearing that from someone who's an idol of mine and that I respect so much, and telling me how far I could really take this. That was a great thing as well. So he's helped me improve in many areas, not just from a technical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint also.
It's so cool, especially because if there were two things that Raymond Daniels was known for, it was jump spinning back kick and his
blitz.
Overwhelming confidence, right?
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
the fact 100%. That he was, the fact that he could
100%.
impart that on you is really cool. So we talked about the differences between the leagues. Now I want to get specific about some of the actual technique rules. You mentioned the front hand to the body. You mentioned the 2-point body kicks being huge rule differences between NASCA and WAKO. So let's go one at a time. Do you like the front hand to the body or not? Would you rather it be legal or not?
To be honest, I don't really mind whether it's legal or not. It's one of those things that's like, I don't care. If it's in the rules, then I'm going to use it. If it helps me to win, I'm going to use it. Like, I think a lot of people have a problem with it because they don't like the look of it. Like, it looks weak or whatever. I've heard a few different people say different things. But for me, if it is in the rules and you're allowed to use it, then why would you not use it? You know, if the other person's using it against you, why would you give them that advantage? I don't understand. I would never give anyone an advantage over me in the fight. So if somebody's using a front hand to the body, I'm going to use a front hand to the body as well. So my view on it is, if it's in the rules, use it. If it's not, then it's a waste of your time. So in WAKO, it's a great effective tool, and I'll continue to use it until they take it out of the rules.
Right. I think that's a great mentality. And that's one thing. I've got a lot of respect for American fighters that when they go to WAKO, they use it effectively. Because I've always thought the same thing. Like, if it's, granted, I don't like the aesthetic of it. I'm one of those guys that thinks, okay, yeah, it does look a little bit weak. But I also see the point. If it's in the rule book, use it, right? It's one thing that Ray did very well. Whenever Ray would go to Irish Open, you would see him. And then I was impressed, Bailey, which we're going to get into your fight with Bailey soon. But Bailey, I noticed in a lot of his fights, he was throwing it, connecting it, trying to use that front hand as well. So I agree, great fighters are going to make the most use of the rules.
Yeah.
Now talking about 2-point body kicks. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Would you rather have them or not? Granted, you're going to use it if it's in the rule book to get your 2 points. But what's your personal preference? Should it be worth 1 or 2 to land that defensive side kick?
I think it should be worth 1 personally, and I wouldn't even mind 2 points so much if it was longer rounds. If it was 2 rounds and it was 2-point body kicks, then I'd be more okay with it. But when it's a 1-round fight, I think it's massively beneficial to the kicker in a 1-round match. It's, you know, you only need to kick the person 3 times and it's 6 points. So you're telling me that to beat you, I've got to blitz you 7 times and you got to kick me 3 times. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think definitely 1-point body kicks is the way to go. However, like it would be better over 2 rounds. But if you put those 2 together, like it's not a good mix. 2-point body kicks and 1-round fights, I personally don't agree with. But if you're asking me, would I want to take it out and just have 1-point body kicks in every fight? Absolutely. I don't think kicks to the body warrant 2 points. I think it's too easy to kick somebody in the belly. Head kicks, absolutely 2 points. Because that's a tricky target. That's difficult and it takes skill to do. But body kicks, my opinion, is 1 point.
Right. And I agree with that. And I think a lot of fighters that I've talked to agree. Even NASCA fighters that are great defensive side kickers think that it should be 1 point for the body kicks for the same reason you gave. My other problem with it is that from the spectator's point of view, it's the most commonly missed call in all of NASCA point fighting is a defensive side kick. I see more judges call a chambered kick that touches somebody's ribs. They call that 2 points. And it's like, wait a minute. If that competitor did not extend a kick, if they did not throw a technique, you're going to give them 2 points for chambering and the other guy happened to touch it? Like, exactly. At least if you're going to give 2 points, make them throw the technique, right?
Make it a perfect kick, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So I see your point there, and I agree with it. So we mentioned Bailey, right? And you had another great fight with Bailey in the final. And in America, as you know, I heard on your show with Alex and Jeff that you've been watching, you've been aware of the run that he was on. And in America, for the last several months, he's been quite literally unbeatable, right? Jack Felton took him to overtime. He's Jack Felton, of course he did, right? But really, there's not many fighters that have been able to come close to Bailey in America recently, right? Fighters have fought him well. I think Enrique fights him well, but Bailey's been dominant, okay? Irish Open, back before the pandemic, you beat him. I believe it was a 10-point spread then as well, maybe more than that. And then in WAKO Worlds, you beat him by double digits again, right? So with Bailey in particular, and I know that you guys have a lot of respect between each other. I've got a ton of respect for Bailey. But for you, what is it that's allowed you to crack that code? What is it that allows you to be effective? If you can pinpoint one thing, or maybe it's a strategy, maybe it's a skill set that you have, what do you think it is?
Well, I always try and take my opponent's strengths away is the biggest thing. So you know, I know how quick Bailey is and how explosive he is as well. So, you know, I try to move a lot. I don't want to sit still in front of somebody like that. Whenever I'm fighting somebody who's a quick blitzer, then one of the strategies that I use is trying to move a lot. So I try to move side to side, lateral movement, just to try and spoil the rhythm or spoil the blitz. But really, I wouldn't say that like I really strategize too much into anyone. I just kind of do my own thing. Obviously, I'm aware of what they're good at, and I'll always try to take that away from them. So I'll watch a couple of fights of people, and if I need to watch any more, then I will spend more time watching. Well, most of the time, I can figure people out within watching like 2 or 3 of their fights, and I know what they like to throw. And then what my goal is then is to take away what they do well and try and impose my strengths. So yeah, Bailey's an amazing fighter, and I know how quick he is with his hands. He's very well rounded as well. He kicks good. He's got good defense, good movement, so explosive. So yeah, I just try to keep a high rhythm, keep moving all the time, and just pick my shots when I see them. But I can't say I have like a specific strategy that I really look into. I just kind of like doing my thing and just feeling what feels doing what feels right in the moment, and just trusting my gut instincts on what to do most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that book is not written, right? There's only 2 chapters of that book. You and Bailey will have many, many more fights to come, whether it's at the Irish Open, when you're able to come back over to America. That fight will happen plenty. And, you know, I heard you on Alex and Jeff's show talking about how Cristiano Ronaldo needs Lionel Messi, LeBron needs Kevin Durant. When I heard that, I was like, we're missing an obvious comparison. This is Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, right?
There you go.
It's the same thing, right? The British guy and the American. You're in better shape than Tyson Fury, of course. But what do you think about that comparison?
That's not difficult, but yeah, absolutely. You know, I have a ton of respect for him, and like I said, steel sharpens steel. So I'm sure we're both going to push each other, and we both want the same things. We both want to achieve greatness. And I think we both will. I think we'll both push each other to that. And you know, I'm sure we'll see each other again at many tournaments, and we'll keep raising each other's games. You know, we need each other. We need each other to get better. These people, these top champions, we're all going to help each other to elevate the game, elevate each other's abilities. So, you know, I'm thankful to have people such as Bailey within this era that are really pushing me towards that greatness, and hopefully I'm doing the same for him as well.
Absolutely. And that's one thing, that's in Forms and Weapons, that's in fighting. If you want to be the best, if you want to be great, then you have to have other competitors that are great as well, right? Exactly. If you're successful in an era of fighters or Forms and Weapons competitors that the talent was just okay, then you're going to be limited as to how great you can truly be, right? You're only as great as the competition that you beat. And that's why as martial artists, it's so important to have such high regard for our competitors, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but I think this would be fun, right? So for me, like I've been a point fighting fan since I started, right? I competed in point fighting as an underbelt, but by the time I got to black belt, I was focused on weapons, and that's what I was good at, so that's what I kept doing. But I was always a fan of point fighting. And I remember remember like the first rivalry, right? We say rivalry, but oftentimes these guys are friends and, you know, they don't actually dislike each other, right? But like the first one that I saw was in America, Damon Gilbert and Raymond Daniels. I saw their battles time and time again in person.
Right.
And then as I got older and Paul Mitchell started going to Irish Open more, and then we picked up Zolt Maslow, the rivalry between Zolt and Ray became like one of the best things in sport karate to watch. So just out of curiosity, we talk about your rivalry with Bailey. What have been some of your favorite sport karate rivalries to watch when you were growing up, even right now? What matchups, what rivalries do you enjoy most?
Yeah, definitely Raymond and Zolt. That was a great one. Raymond and Zolt was an awesome rivalry, and you know that one was you never knew who was going to get that one. You know, I was obviously always rooting for Raymond, but Zolt is a absolutely tremendous fighter and such a great kicker. You know, so they had some amazing fights, and like you, Jackson, that's probably my number one rivalry there that I remember watching all the time growing up. But also Michael Page and Ray was another good one as well. But Michael Page was fighting against Ray a lot. And just because they're both so charismatic, I think that's why people love it. They're both, you know what they're like. They love to do a dance and they love the showboating and things like that. So having those two is like, you know, Michael's like our UK version of Ray. And then you've got Ray from the States, so that was an amazing little rivalry there as well with those two. So yeah, I would say Ray and Zolt, and then Ray and Michael Page as well. Probably the most fun for me to watch.
For sure. And what's so funny about that is I feel like so many people's answer is going to include Ray. Like even people back in the States, it was Ray and Brian Ruth, or Ray and Jason Borelli, or Ray and Trevor Nash, or whoever.
Which goes to show the longevity of his career and how like he's been at the top for so long. We talk about the greats in other sports like Tom Brady and Cristiano Ronaldo, that, you know, people that are like well into their 30s, maybe even 40s, still going, and they're still at the highest level in the sport. And Ray's one of those people that like did this for like nearly 20 years. He was at the top of the game, so it's incredible. So obviously he's had many different rivals throughout that time, but it just goes to show, and it's a credit to what he's been able to do.
Absolutely. So we talk about these rivalries. Now let's shift it back to you, right? So the big rivalry right now is you and Bailey. You've had other rivalries, you know, coming up through the ranks and all that. You mentioned on Inside Scoop talking about Roland Varez and some of the battles that you guys had. So if you look at everybody that you've ever fought, right? If you had to pick three, who are the three guys that gave you the toughest time? Who were the three most difficult fighters you've had to face, and why? And you can put them in order, out of order, doesn't matter.
Well, I've actually had the chance. I mean, I would love to do this now and really test my abilities against these guys. But I was lucky enough, because I was always fighting as a junior and up into the adult divisions as well. Like I was a junior fighting in the adult divisions. I caught the end of like Raymond and the Raymond and Zolt era. So I actually got to fight Raymond once, which I also spoke about on Inside Scoop. So we actually fought in open weight at Irish Open. I think I was 15 years old. So that's like incredibly young to be fighting Ray, but definitely obviously have to put Ray in there as like toughest competitor. And then I also got the chance to fight Zolt. So Zolt's got to be in there, but I only fought Zolt in team fighting. So I was a little bit disappointed I didn't get to fight him in an actual individual division or an open weight or for something like that. But I still got to share the match with him nonetheless. And I can remember his leg coming at me, and it was incredible. You know, so like the one thing I was so impressed about with Zolt is his balance. Like he's always perfectly balanced, which is amazing. Like a lot of people, when you see them kick and they've got great legs, you can sort of find gaps with them. Like they'll go to kick, but they'll land heavy on the front leg, or they'll be a little bit slow picking up their chamber. Zolt doesn't have that. Zolt is a very difficult person to fight against because there's literally no gaps. So I think Zolt was definitely one of the toughest fights. And then I got to put Jack Felton in there as well because of how well-rounded Jack is. And yeah, I mean, he can punch, he can kick, he can move. Jack's one of them people that's just can do anything. And he's really, really fit as well. He's got great cardio. So you add all that together, and he's an absolute beast. So I think they're probably my three toughest opponents: Ray, Zolt, and Jack.
Right. I think that's a great three. And Jack in particular, I feel like is one of the most underrated all-time great point fighters, right? Because
I hear people say that a lot, you know, I hear people say that he is underrated, but for me, like, I regard him as one of the biggest legends of the sport all time, you know, and I do hear people say that he's underrated, but honestly, like, if people think he's underrated, then they're crazy, because this guy is amazing. Like, definitely, for me, he's one of the legends of the sport. So yeah, it's like, when people say that, it shocks me a lot. I'm like, you think Jack's underrated? Like, you know, but
I think it's just the era he fought in, right? Like, the dude has made as many Irish Open Final Fours as anybody, but there was always Ray and Zolt, and you can't blame somebody for being in Raymond and Zolt's era, right?
This is it. That is exactly it. Yeah, you're right. You know, is that Jack just had a tough era of fighters. But you know, that guy is a beast, and I definitely regard him as probably all round is definitely one of the best of all time, because that guy can do everything. He can kick, punch, move. He's great at tackling the leg. He's got a great mentality. His cardio is insane. So yeah, big props to Jack, and yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. Definitely in the top three, and definitely one of my toughest opponents ever.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And he's in my top 5 lightweights of all time. I need to do a show at some point where we go through like top 5.
That would be good. That would be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so Jack, definitely one of the all-time greats, got inducted into the Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame last year as the competitor of the year. So obviously one of the best to ever do it. It's also an inside scoop. This was a question that I knew I wanted to ask you. You said there's not really anybody that's out there fighting right now that you're like, I really want to fight that guy. You're just going to keep making yourself better, right? We talk about retired fighters that you wish you would have gotten a chance at. You mentioned Gregorio from Italy, right? But now I want to flip the question a little bit. If I made you pick retired American competitors, who's like, and I know that you may or may not know about some of these guys, right? But if you look back to, and there's film of it, right? If you look back to some of the guys that are considered America's all-time great fighters, right? I'll throw out names like Pedro Xavier, like Kevin Thompson, like Steve Anderson, like Richard Plowden, right? Looking back on all of those great American fighters, are there any of those that you're like, I would have loved to have fight this person, out of respect, of course?
Yeah, out of pure respect, and I'm lucky enough to have got the chance to spar with him on numerous occasions as well. And he's a great friend of mine, Jardy Tension. I would have loved that opportunity as well. Jardy's up there as one of the best ever, also. And yeah, I would have loved that out of pure respect for him. He's taught me so much as well. He's another, you know, he's played a big role in making me the fighter that I am now, because I've gone to, you can ask him as well, I've gone to all of his seminars. Every time he's in the UK, I always make the time to go and see him. I've been lucky enough to go to TCK Winter Camp a couple of times as well. So yeah, I would have loved to have been able to fight Jardy, definitely. And he kind of just retired as I was coming up the ranks. I remember I saw him, the last time I saw him fight was Bristol Open. He actually came to Bristol Open back in, I think it was like 2013 or 2014, but I was still a little bit young then, so didn't have the opportunity to fight against him. But I think he would be up there. If you asked any top European fighter that question, and sticking to just American fighters, I think a lot of them would say Jardy, because he's really well known over here. But he, in his later years, I know he did in his early years, but in his later years, he didn't really come over to Europe as much. So people didn't get the chance to fight against him. So I think a lot of European people would say the same, that they would love to have competed against Jardy and tested their skills.
For sure. Jardy, of course, one of the all-time greats as well. And what's impressive about him, like Ray, was the longevity of his career, right? Like he fought into 2013, 14, 15, especially like on Team Impex. That team had a stacked team fighting squad when they had Jardy, because there was Jardy, a young Avery Plowden, Ross Levine, of course, another one of the all-time greats. And
Yeah.
then you had Jason Grenier, I think Willie Hicks at the time. So they just had a stacked roster, which was, of course, a ton of fun to watch. And that was also the era where Paul Mitchell had Zolt and Zolt Laszlo.
Yeah.
So we had some great battles with Zolt, Laszlo, and Justin Ortiz against Impex. And I could go on about that forever. But anyway, I fanboy about my own team all the time, if you haven't noticed. Cool. So we've talked about who you wish you could have fought if they were still around, stuff like that. You mentioned Jody. But moving forward, right, even if it's not an individual that you want to fight, anything like that, what's your next goal? You've won so many of all that there is to win, right? What is the top 2 or 3 goals on your list? What do you want to achieve next?
Well, I'm very close to achieving one of my goals, which was to win all the WAKO World Series events open weight. I'm very close. So I have golden gloves. I have won golden gloves, but it's not on the World Series. But I have like Athens Challenge, I have Irish Open, I have Hungarian World Cup, I have Best Fighter, I have Flanders Cup, Grand Champion. So the only ones that I'm missing is the Austrian Classics and the Dutch Open. So I need to win those 2 Grand Champion titles in Europe, which is a big goal of mine. So I'd like to say that I've won the Grand Champion in all of Europe's major events. So I'm very close to accomplishing that one. So that's one of my goals. Also, I want to get out to the States more. I'd like to go to the big tournaments out in the States. Obviously, I've done US Open before. I've done compete. I've won both of those. AKA, I won my division, but I'd like to go back and fight for the Warrior Cup. I'd like to go to Diamonds. I'd like to go to Battle of Atlanta. All of these big events out there in the States. I'd love to have the opportunity to go out there and compete. And obviously now the exciting thing with WAKO is that we've been included in a lot of different continental games as well. So we have the European Games in 2023, the European Olympic Games, which is going to be huge. And point fighting has been confirmed as a sport within the European Olympic Games. So I'm definitely going to be working towards that one in 2023. So the qualifiers for that will be next year at the European Championships. So as long as I qualify, I'll be able to compete at the European Olympics the following year. And we also have the World Combat Games in Saudi Arabia in 2023 as well, which is another one of my goals that I want to do, that I want to win, because the list of people that have won the World Combat Games is very small, because it only happens, it's not guaranteed for WAKO to be in it every single time. So it's only been in there for a limited number of years. So that's something that I would really like to have, that not many other fighters have that title. So I'd love to have a World Combat Games title. And we've also spoke a little bit about WAKO Pro as well. So I'd like to do a WAKO Pro world title fight also, which is like, I think it's 5 to 7 rounds or something like that. So I would like to do that. I've got a ton of goals, Jackson. I could keep going. And then eventually I'd like to dive into some full contact as well and start doing that a little bit more. So obviously still got tons to go within the point fighting, but I would also like to eventually dip my feet in the full contact and start to do things in there as well.
That's awesome. And all great champions always have lofty goals. All of those goals within reach for you, right? I can see as a fan exactly how all of that could play out over the coming years, and you being able to achieve that. And it's a testament to your skill, your work ethic, the progress that you've been able to make. Because like I said, I'm a point fighting fan. So since, probably 2011, I've been watching point fighters. And so I've seen from you being the guy that was, this good guy on Top 10 UK to being the all-star fighter to being the Irish Open champion. And that's been truly special to watch, and congratulations to you for that. And I think sport karate as a community should all be, crossing our fingers that European Games goes well, and that ultimately we can get at least point fighting, and then hopefully forms of weapons as an Olympic sport as well, right? So I love the effort that WAKO is doing, and Roy Baker's done an incredible job trying to get us leverage to get sport karate recognized by the Olympic Committee, and ultimately get us into the Olympic Games. And then on one of your other goals, I will say Warrior Cup is the coolest trophy in all of sport karate. So
it's incredible. Yeah, absolutely.
And they'll ship it to you if you win it. If you win it, they'll ship it to you.
I know. I was actually went last time I was in California for that tournament. Evelyn won it, and Evelyn was on All Stars at that time, and she won the Women's Warrior Cup. and I saw it then, and they shipped it out to her and everything like that. So it's an incredible trophy. Yeah, I'd have to say it's the best, 100% the best trophy. So that one's definitely on my hit list. I'd love to have that here in my gym on display.
That's awesome. Well, Elijah, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great show, all kinds of great insights. And truly, you make a great role model for all the young athletes in the sport, whether it's forms, weapons, fighting, doesn't matter. Guys, if you're tuning in, Elijah is the perfect person to look up to in terms of mentality, work ethic, the way that he handles himself professionally in and outside of the ring. So Elijah, thank you for being you and giving a great interview. Any last words that you'd like to share?
No, I just like to say thank you very much, Jackson, for having me on, and it's a pleasure talking to you about all this stuff. I mean, I could chat about sport karate, kickboxing for days on end. So it's been a real pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And to all of our audience tuning in, especially those of you watching on Black Belt Magazine's Facebook page, thank you for tuning in. As always, if you've got questions or if you want to have discussions down in the comments, drop those comments down below. I'll be checking those out. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you hit that share button. Make sure that everybody knows about it, because that's how we keep growing this sport karate community, making the sport bigger and better. So hit that share button, hit that like button, and let me know what other guests you want to have on the show. We've got arguably the best point fighter in the world right now on the show today. So if you guys want to keep these great guests coming, drop them down in the comments. Let me know who you want me to talk to, and we'll make those shows happen. So Elijah, thank you very much again. Thank you to Black Belt Magazine for sponsoring the show and hosting the podcast. This has been episode 82. I'm Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.
I'm Elijah Everill. See you later, guys.